guys, what's up? Pashia here, and in this video we'll be covering the first behavior that most new dog guardians want to teach their dog: how to teach a dog to sit. Be sure to stick around until the end, because we won't just be covering how to teach your dog to sit, but also the dog training basics you need to know to get your dog started off on the right foot. Let's get to it. Conditioning a marker word. First things first, when you're teaching your dog any new behavior, is to ensure that you're on the same page when it comes to communication. Something that I certainly notice about my dog is that they don't understand English. How am I supposed to communicate with them what I'd like them to do? I'll be discussing a few communication strategies for your dog throughout the video, but the absolute first and necessary thing we need to teach our dog is when they're on the right track and when they've done something we like. We call this a marker. A marker can be many things. It can be a clicker that makes a click sound, letting your dog know when they've done the desired behavior. It can be a verbal yes that you say excitedly as soon as they sit. It can even be a visual hand signal, like a thumbs up gesture. I've used this in my training before with dogs that are deaf, since they are unable to hear a clicker or a verbal marker. Whatever you choose to use as your marker, it's critically important that you are presenting the marker consistently and at the right moment in time. A marker that comes too early or too late will only serve to muddy the communication with your dog. I like to think of my marker as the snapshot of a camera, taking a picture at the exact moment that my dog does something that I like. Watch this clip of this dog sitting. Sound off first. When would you place the marker? Say yes to yourself as soon as you would mark this behavior, taking a snapshot of what you'd like to see. Did you get it? If you said to place the marker right when the dog's butt hits the ground, you'd be correct. Watch that clip again, now with the sound on. We're using a yes to mark this dog's sit behavior. Yes. See how we marked the sit behavior with a yes immediately after their butt hit the ground? That's clear communication and good timing. When you begin your training journey with your dog, they won't know what your marker means. So our first step is to teach them. This is called conditioning a marker. For the rest of this video, we'll use yes as our marker word. To condition a marker word, start with a handful of treats. For puppies, breaking the treats into bite-sized, easy-to-digest pieces is important. Bonus points if you have a treat pouch to hold your food. You'll definitely need this later on in your training journey. Starting in a calm environment and with your food within reach, say yes. Reach for the food and immediately deliver a treat to your dog's mouth. It doesn't matter what they're doing at that moment, just make sure that they get the food immediately after you say yes. Repeat this process 5 to 7 times. What we're looking for here is some recognition from your dog. When you say yes, we're looking for them to swivel their head our way, expectantly, looking for some food. That's how you know they're starting to make the connection. Continue this process 7 to 10 reps at a time, 3 to 5 times per day, until your dog consistently gives you attention just after using their marker word. If you would prefer to use a clicker or another marker word instead, that's just fine. That process is the same, just swap out a verbal marker with the marker that you choose. It's important to note that a marker and praise are two different things. A marker will mark the exact moment they do something you like and is a promise to your dog that a food reward is coming. If you'd like to use praise as a reward, that's great, but reserve your marker for when specifically a food reward is about to be delivered. A marker word and praise don't function in the same way. For example, the marker sounds exactly the same every single time, but praise often changes every time we use it. One time it can be good boy, and another time it could be very good. Keep in mind as well that while praise can be rewarding for some dogs, it is rarely ever sufficient to use only praise in their training. The dog is the one that decides what is reinforcing for them, so use rewards that they like, and you'll see your training with them progress much more quickly. Okay. Now that we've laid the foundation for training the sit behavior, let's get started. Step 1, lure into position. So to teach our dog to sit, we're going to start by luring them into position and then marking the behavior when they sit. I like to start with a bit of food in between my fingers. I don't want the dog to be able to access it, so a small bit of food will work. I'll start by getting the dog to follow the food. I might move them around the room for a bit to get them excited to work with me. When I'm ready to lure the sit, I'll simply bring the food closer to their nose and slowly bring it back and over their head. Most dogs will follow the food and pop, their butt goes on the ground. Immediately after that happens, say yes, or click your clicker and give them a treat. It's totally fine to use the bit of food that you were luring them with. Repeat this luring process until the dog is sitting reliably. You'll likely see those sits happening faster and faster over time. If that's the case, you'll know you're on the right track. Step 2. Fading the lure. Once your dog is reliably sitting by using the food lure, you can start to fade it out. Right now, your hand might be in what I call the chef's kiss pose. And I want you to think about what kind of hand signal we might want to pair with this behavior long term for when you'd like to ask your dog to sit. For me, I use a closed fist, going from my waist to my shoulder to cue this. But you can use whatever feels natural to you, as long as you're consistent. So we need to transition from our chef's kiss hand to our closed fist. I might start with the same food lure, but putting the food into my closed fist instead of it being visible. From there, I might back my hand away from the dog's nose a few inches and try again. Over the course of a few repetitions, I should be able to get 1 to 2 feet away from my dog's nose with the visual cue. Continue marking with a yes and giving a bit of food every time your dog's butt hits the ground. If I really want to go for the gold, I might even work this process slowly into standing up and giving the visual cue for sit while I'm standing a foot or 2 away from the dog. I also want to be sure to remove the food from my hand relatively quickly and reach for it in my treat pouch instead. This is a common error for people just starting out with their dog, keeping the food in your hand for too long in the training process. Inevitably, the food becomes a part of the cue, and then we have a dog who doesn't listen unless they can see the food. Be sure to work this step slowly and only progress when your dog is consistently successful at each small step before. Errorless learning is the key to success here. Go slow to go fast, as they say. Have you noticed that the entire training process up to this point has been largely silent? Aside from our marker, we haven't really been saying anything to our dog. It continues to astound me how much our dogs can learn from us when we're silent and use nonverbal communication to let them know what we're asking for. I encourage you to play around with training silently when you teach other behaviors as well. Of course, there are times when we want to ask our dog to sit. For this, we use a verbal cue. To give meaning to the cue initially, remember, our dogs don't speak English, we have to create an association between what we are asking of them and what the dog is doing. To add a verbal cue to any behavior, we want to start by timing our cue to happen immediately before the dog sits. If I can get the timing correct here, saying the word sit will be a cue for the sit to happen. Watch how I work with this dog to add a verbal cue to their already well-known sit behavior.
Sit. Yes. Boy. Sit.
Did you notice how over time I was able to say sit earlier and earlier to the point where it became predictive of the dog sitting? This is how your dog is able to learn that words mean things. I'll never stop being impressed by how dogs can learn that random sounds mean specific things. It's so cool. By now, your dog will know how to sit consistently when presented with a verbal and visual cue. But does that mean that your dog will sit for you in all situations? Absolutely not. Making sure that your dog's behaviors are generalized is an important part of teaching any new skill. In our next video, we'll talk about how to get your dog to sit reliably in nearly all situations through a process called proofing. We'll also be talking about troubleshooting the sit behavior if you're having a difficult time working with your dog on this. This is a foundational behavior to teach all dogs, and making sure that you know how your dog learns and works with you best is critical to your long-term relationship with them. So in this video, we just covered how to condition a marker word so that you can open up communication with your dog, the difference between reinforcement, like praise, and a marker word, the step-by-step process of teaching your dog to sit, including luring them into position with food and getting them to sit in the first place, fading out the food lure, which preps them to reliably sit on cue, and saying the word sit as a verbal cue to have your dog sitting when you ask. Be sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss out on our troubleshooting and proofing video, and so that you can have your dog sitting in all kinds of places with distractions. I'm Pashia with the Canine, and it's been my pleasure to sit with you through this process of learning more about your dog. Bye for now.